Now we continue with chapter 6, the path and the saints. From chapter 3 and chapter 5, we have learned the effect, the cause, and the conditions for the impure world of samsara. And now it is time to reverse it. We need to know the effect, the cause, and conditions for the pure factors, and for attaining and for liberation and nirvana. So we start from the effect, namely the saints and the noble fruits, and also the path through which we can get there. Let us start from of course, in this chapter we will talk about topics like the Four Noble Truths, relative or ultimate truth, and the stages leading to liberation, penetration, roots of good, path of vision, path of cultivation. And then we also will talk about those in or beyond training. And we will finish this chapter by the 37 A's of enlightenment. First, let's make a comparison between the path of vision and the path of cultivation, which we have mentioned a little in chapter 5 already, but now it's a good time to make a further comparison between the two. And before that, we need to emphasize that the noble path is the only way for one to become a noble being, to become a saint. It's very important. So the first difference between the two is that the path of vision is merely pure, while the path of cultivation could be pure or impure. This is the general understanding, a general view of the Hinayana, Shravaka Yana, and so on. However, according to Mahayana, there is a different view, because the Mahayana school would say that before we attain the first stage of Bodhisattva, that's the preliminary or the preparatory stages before the first stage Bodhisattva, those are impure path. And once a sentient being has arrived or has obtained the first stage Bodhisattva, that is the penetration, that corresponds to the path of vision. And from then on, he or she becomes a noble being. And then from the first to the 10th stage of Bodhisattva, that is the path of cultivation. And after that, of course, one will, at the end of the 10th stage Bodhisattva, will arise the Vajra Samadhi, and then next moment is the Buddhahood. So between the first stage and all the way up to the 10th stage, which include the path of vision and the path of cultivation, according to Mahayana, they are all pure path. And the second difference is the way of abandoning defilement. That we have explained already in chapter 5. We have different metaphors, right? Like, for instance, a light can expel all the darkness in a cave. Even that darkness has been there for 1,000 years. That's a momentary path of vision, and those defilements to be abandoned by path of vision will be abandoned within those 16 moments. While the defilements to be abandoned by cultivation is carried out gradually, and from different stages, from Kamadhatu all the way up to the Arupadhatu. When it comes to the period, the path of vision is to be accomplished in one life. And then there's no doubt about it, because it only includes 16 moments, and one will not die, an immature death will not happen during this 16 moments. After that, when this sentient being, when this noble being has entered into the path of cultivation, then it is possible, but not before that. Therefore, the path of vision is accomplished in one life, and that is for sure. And path of cultivation, however, can last and can be continued in many lives. And in the case of the bodhisattvas who are on the way to Buddhahood, that will last for many kalpas. And for Pudgala, the path of vision is merely for noble beings. that is beyond the reach of ordinary beings. While the path of cultivation, again according to Hinayana, could also be practiced by ordinary worldlings, which is consistent with point 1, that this path of cultivation could be pure and impure. Then when it comes to cognitive objects, the path of vision has objects, has the Four Noble Truths as the cognitive objects. And the path of cultivation cover everything. Their objects are everything, all dhammas. And we also know, if we recall chapter 1, we already know that 15 out of the 18 dhatus are merely to be abandoned by the path of cultivation. And about the identity of sentient beings, we will know, or the place for the path of vision or cultivation to be practiced, and that's for the path of vision. It can only be achieved in Kamadhatu, and the path of cultivation could be realized in all 3 realms. So what does it really mean here is that a sentient being can only first become a noble being in Kamadhatu, in this realm of desire, despite so much pain or so many defilements. And in fact, we say sometimes that the suffering here in Kamadhatu is the driving force for one to have renunciation, the mind of renunciation, and then to push the sentient beings towards liberation. So they have this kind of determination that will arise in the realm of desire, and they will first become a noble being also here in the realm of desire, either as human or as a deva here. So okay, so we have further compared now the 2 paths, which is very important for us to understand this entire chapter. Now let's take an overview of the path, the general path towards perfection. If we see from the perspective of a Hinayana, from the perspective of Shravakayana, and this is the path. This is the path they should go through before they reach perfection, before they become an arhat. So it includes the path prior to being noble, those preparatory, the general preparatory paths, and also after one has become a noble being. So prior to being noble, we have this meditation on calm abiding, in Sanskrit it's samatha, which include, but not limited to, include the 2 doors of entry, and we will learn more about it very soon. Meditation on the low therm and mindfulness of breathing, we will talk about it very soon. And then we also have meditation on insight, that is vipassana in Sanskrit. So it includes the 4 applications of mindfulness, individually or collectively. Also the 4 roots of good, that's the heat, summit, receptivity, and supreme mundane dharma. The meditation on calm abiding plus the 4 applications of mindfulness, they are the general preparatory path, which means the stages conducive to liberation. While the 4 roots of good, from heat to the supreme mundane dharma, they are the special preparatory path, meaning the stages conducive to penetration. It's getting closer to penetration, or to the direct realization of the noble path. Then we have these different saints. We can categorize them into 4 pairs. The approacher of a stream enterer, that's the noble ones in the path of vision. And then we have fruit of this stream enterer from the 16th moment of that realization. Then we have approach of the once returner, then the fruit of the once returner, approach of the non-returner, a fruit of the non-returner, and we also have the approach of the perfected being and fruit of the perfected being. While from the fruit of the stream enterer all the way up to the approach of the perfected being, these noble ones are during the path of cultivation, and we call them, plus the noble ones in the path of vision, which is the approacher of the stream enterer. All these are, we call them the noble ones in training, those in training. While the approach and fruit is kind of like the unhindered path and the path of liberation. And the last one, the fruit of the perfected being, which means a perfected noble one. In Shravaka Yana, of course, it means an Arhat. And if it is Pacceka Buddha, well, then it is Pacceka Buddha in another case. Well, the perfected being for Mahayana, it means a Buddha. So this is noble beings beyond training. There's no more for them to be trained. So in this chapter, we will introduce all of them, all of these paths, general, special, in training, and beyond training. And we start from the stages prior to being noble. We start from how to prepare ourselves to be a qualified practitioner. And we'll talk about it all the way up to the perfected noble beings. Next, let us spend some time on the Four Noble Truths, which are really fundamental, one of the core doctrines in the primitive Buddhism. So the Four Truths are the truths of suffering, of the origin, cessation, and of the path. When we say origin, it means the origin of suffering, and when we say cessation, it means cessation of suffering. And when we say the truth of the path, it means the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. So they're also the order in which they are directly realized, and not only that, they are also the order in which they are practiced during the preparatory stages. So they are consistent. The order is consistent prior to being noble and after and during the direct realization. The order is consistent. Then we need to ask, why in this order? Why suffering first and the path as the last? Well, it's like a patient. It's like a patient being sick and suffering, which corresponds to the suffering. And then next, he will look for the cause, which is the origin, right? Then he will start thinking of getting recovered, and that status of getting recovered is cessation of suffering. And then he will start to look for good medicine, which can cure his disease, and that good medicine corresponds to the truth of the path. So that's a very reasonable order. And we can also say that when this patient comes to a doctor, a good doctor will know his syndrome well, will know the suffering well, and also know the reason causing the sickness, which is the origin, and also knows the status of full recovery, which is the cessation of suffering, and then the doctor also knows the required medicine to cure the disease, and which is the path. Buddha is such a doctor, and we are such patients. Next question is, why are they called the Noble Truth? Well, they are only seen precisely and correctly by the noble beings. We might also understand or reflect a little bit from at a shallow level on these Four Noble Truths. However, we cannot really precisely and accurately, we cannot precisely realize them. That's beyond the ability of ordinary beings. So these can only be precisely seen and realized by the noble beings. Therefore, they are called the Noble Truth. The next question is, why the truth of suffering and the truth of origin are also established as noble truth? Because we know that the truth of suffering and the truth of the origin, they actually include dharmas or factors that are impure. They do not include pure factors. So why they are also called noble truth? Well, the reason is that ordinary beings hold mistaken views and cannot recognize their natures, and only noble beings can. Especially when it comes to the truth of suffering and the truth of origin. We as ordinary beings, we often have totally mistaken views. For instance, we take the unclean as clean, we take the suffering as happiness, and so on. There is actually a verse that goes like, those nobles feel pleasant. For instance, cessation, nirvana, that's what noble beings feel pleasant about. Are sufferings to ordinary beings or to outsiders. We might feel it as a kind of suffering, or for outsiders, they don't even dare to go along this path. They think it's going to be an annihilation of of the mind, of the body, everything will be destroyed. So they have a wrong view about it. So they don't even dare to try. And for them, they're sufferings. And on the contrary, those nobles take as suffering, for instance, those impure factors and this samsara, this endless birth and death, conditioned factors, and so on. Nobles would take them as suffering. However, they are pleasures to ordinary beings. We are quite addicted to them. And that's why it is difficult for us to get rid of samsara. And for these reasons, we say that it is very reasonable that the truth of suffering and truth of origin are also established as the noble truth. Well, how many factors are included? We say that the Four Noble Truths include 73 out of 75 factors. Well, you still remember those 75 factors in 5 categories, right? So the Four Noble Truths include 73 of them, except the space as well as the cessation not due to discernment. And why? Because the space and cessation not due to discernment, these two are pure factors. Therefore, they cannot be included in a noble truth of suffering or the truth of the origin. These two factors are non-defined, and therefore they cannot be included in the truth of cessation, because the cessation due to discernment is pure, is good and pure. And also these two factors are unconditioned factors. Therefore, they're not included in the truth of path, because the truth of path is conditioned. Despite being conditioned, we still need the truth of path, of course, in order to reach the cessation due to discernment, in order to obtain the unconditioned nirvana. Okay, now let's talk about the relative and ultimate truth as well, because since we're talking about truth, Vasubandhu brought in these two relative and ultimate truths as well, so we can have an understanding on them, because they're also important. As Nagarjuna once said, if one could not tell these two types of truth, if one don't know the difference, doesn't know the difference of these two, then he's unable to understand the real meaning of the most profound Dharma. So yes, it is very important to anyone who wants to understand the Buddhist philosophy and the differences inside and outside. So the two truths are the relative truth and the ultimate truth. According to Sabstivada, I have to emphasize this because this illustration shows the view of Sabstivada, and for them, the relative truth is a dharma such as a bottle of water, if physically breakable. For example, if we break a bottle with a hammer, or if it is not physically breakable but it can be mentally broken. Like for instance, if we can analyze in our mind, we can analyze about the water, and after that, after physically or mentally, after the physical or mental breaking, the notion of such factors will be gone. We will not think it is a bottle. We will not think it is water anymore. Well, such kind of factors, we call them relative truth. And on the contrary, a dharma, such as an infinitesimal particle that cannot be physically broken, well, that is the smallest particle to Sabstivada, that cannot be physically broken further. It's already the smallest. And it cannot be further analyzed in the mind as well. And this notion would remain. An infinitesimal particle is always, we have this idea, this notion that it is the infinitesimal particle. It cannot be physically or mentally broken or analyzed. Therefore, that belongs to the ultimate truth. Meaning the concept would remain. So, for instance, if we break a bottle, right? If we break a bottle, the notion of the bottle is gone. We see only pieces, the glass pieces. However, the blue color, if it's let's say if it's a blue bottle, although we break it into pieces, the blue color remains. It remains in every tiny piece. So Even at the atomic level, we would say that the Savastivadian scholars would say that it's still blue. Right. Recall that the Savastivada believed the co-origin of 8 rupa, including the visible form, right? So that blue color still remains. Also, if we analyze water with our mind, the notion or concept of water will be gone. However, the taste of that water will remain. So, the blue color of that bottle or the taste of the water, according to Savastivada, are ultimate truth. We do have different views from other schools. For instance, Sautrantika scholars would say that the objects of the cognitions of ordinary beings are all relative truth. Any object apprehended by the cognitions of ordinary beings, what we see, what we hear, what we think of in our daily life every day, awake or in sleep, whatever, belongs to relative truth. And the objects of the pure cognitions and the right mundane cognitions possessed by noble beings, they are the ultimate truth. So, according to Sautrantika, actually what they really mean is the ultimate truth is already beyond the reach of ordinary beings. Ordinary beings can only have contact with the relative truth. That's what Sautrantika means. Well, according to Yogacara, that they would say that no object but alaya, that is the ultimate truth. And the rest, all the rest, if you talk about this dualism, if you talk about the things in our daily life, well, they are the relative truth. And if according to Madhyamaka, the ultimate truth is not an object of mind. All object of mind, whatever it is, they are relative truth. All kinds of thoughts, languages, whatever that we can apprehend or we can think of or we can express, they are relative truth. The ultimate truth cannot be think of, cannot be apprehended or considered by our mind. It's not an object of our mind. And according to Vajrayana, the emptiness and the illumination, or the emptiness and the manifestation, they're one. There's no way to separate them. And the so-called ultimate or relative truth are indeed both ultimate. If we have to use a word, then they're the same. They're all ultimate, which we cannot really express, but only realize with the power of the path. Next, let's talk about the preparatory stages. And we start from the general preparatory path that are the stages conducive to liberation. So we have 3 practices to qualify a practitioner. So obviously we see that where do we start? If we have a Buddhist practitioner, if you ask him or her, where do we start? Well, according to Vasubandhu or Abhidhamma, we should definitely start by qualifying ourselves as a practitioner. And how do we qualify ourselves? Well, we do these 3 practices. With 2 withdrawals, being content and with little desires, be content with little desires, and also these 4 families of the noble persons. So let's start from the first one. Well, Vasubandhu also said actually that all starts with discipline and discernment from hearing, reflection, and cultivation, with diligent practices. That's the original word by Vasubandhu. And what does it mean by 2 withdrawals? Well, the bodily, it means setting aside conjunctions. And what kind of conjunctions? Well, conjunction with crowds of mundane people, sometimes some bad influencing friends maybe, and crowded places like markets, shopping malls maybe, and so on. And mentally setting aside bad thoughts. But of course, we keep the good ones, like reflection on the meaning of Dharma. We need it for now. We gradually replace the bad with the good until one day we can go beyond the good as well. But there is an order, and it takes time. So right now, we just set aside the bad thoughts. and keep the good ones, especially the good ones about cultivating good dhammas. The next practice, the second one, to qualify oneself as practitioner, is being content and with little desires. And by saying being content or contentment, it means one is satisfied with what one already possesses, while little desires means that one is satisfied or one does not want to possess those one hasn't yet. So these two are non-greed in nature, of course. So we should be content and with little desires, which is the second practice to qualify a practitioner. And the third one is we should stick to these four families of the noble persons. Should be content with clothing, content with food, be content with bed and seat, and take delight in cessation and to the path. The first three, being content with clothing, food, and bed and seat, these are over the basic needs in our daily life. And the last one, take delight in cessation and to the path, means that we are diligent. Is to remember the definition of diligence, that we have joy in cultivating the good dhammas. We have delight in cessation and to the path. So this is the three practices to qualify one as a Buddhist practitioner. Master Zhiming once said that it is impossible to penetrate and be enlightened without discipline, samapati, and cognitions, because Buddhism talks about causes and conditions. With these, the enlightenment can arise, and so we must value these preparatory stages before one could directly realize the noble truth and enter the pure stream. So again, the question is, what is the first thing to do? What is the priority that we should focus on when we start to cultivate good dhammas? When we have stepped onto this path towards liberation? The answer is we start from making ourselves a qualified practitioner with these three practices. So obviously they are important. Next, we will continue with the preparatory stages, the general preparatory path. We will talk about the two doors of entry. After that, we can continue with the meditation on insight, the four applications of mindfulness, and so on. So that is for now.